Hey, Wheelchair Gunfighter here. So, I want to make a video real quick about knives. I've had quite a few questions about different types of knives and why this and I prefer this and whatever. And I kind of wanted to back up some of the stuff that I have planned in the future before kind of a precursor to some videos I'm going to do on knives or on blade work and explain why we use particular blade shapes or designs or what have you, and kind of understand and give you what I know or have come to know about different types of blades. So first, let me say that I don't believe in an all-purpose blade. Obviously, if you take a sharp piece of metal and jab it into soft tissue, it's going to do something nasty to that soft tissue. I don't think that even needs to be addressed. You can take a screwdriver and be effective enough with it to solve a problem. However, if you want to solve a problem efficiently, if you want to do certain things well, then you need to have purpose-built blades. If you take a knife that's particularly designed for combat, say something like the CRKT Shinbu, designed by James Williams, and you try to do a lot of heavy-duty utility work with this, you're going to find that the knife doesn't last that long, right? Likewise, if you try to fight with something that's much more utility-oriented, you're going to find it has its limitations. And the idea here is I don't believe in just hacking, just attack until the person's no longer coming at you. I believe very wholeheartedly in developing the ability to efficiently solve problems, to only do exactly what's necessary. And that comes only from skill, from developing skill through training and viewing your particular threat environment objectively. And also being able to read that environment objectively as a situation is developing. So, I don't believe in training for the lowest common denominator. Here's just a pile of techniques. I hope you survive. Bye. Right? It completely goes against everything that is our philosophy at White Rabbit and what we're trying to put into Project Wheelchair Gunfighter. Because surviving is great. Thriving in that environment, getting out of it without further injuries and being maimed and possibly killed and all this, that's something else entirely. So, that goes back to all these things we're saying about, not sacrificing body parts and, doing these things that are destructive to your body. Anyway, so, moving on. Let's talk about blade shapes first, and I've got this one in my hand, so, a lot of people like these types, these S-shaped curved blades for fighting, and these kind of come out of Southeast Asia. The concave blade, the concave portion of the blade collects material, and this S, the top part of the S, shears through it. Okay, but basically concave collects, convex disperses. It's fairly simple. A straight blade doesn't really do either. Right? Think of something more like this, kind of this portion of the K-bar, the straight blade. It doesn't do either. Now, the design philosophy behind stuff like this, you're talking about the Greek kopis, you're talking about the kukri. The idea was that you strike at the base of the blade, it collects the material, and the blade was designed size-wise for what the given art was, the style behind it was designed to be cutting through in that environment. The kukri, for example, great at taking off a limb. It was large enough to collect the material at the hand, or even at the shoulder, or upper arm for a larger blade, or even at the neck. It collected the material, the top of the blade, sheared through that collected material is an excellent chopping tool. Not really good for stabbing. It's not what it's designed for. Do you have something pointy and you can stab it? Yes. Efficiently, can you get through ribs? Can you get into certain places like behind the collarbone and stab into certain soft tissues for controlled disabling techniques? No. It's a chopping tool. Generally speaking, a knife can only do three things. It can chop, which is kind of your blunt force trauma, trying to get through whole sections of the body. Right, you're trying to power through whole sections of the body. So chopping, you're thinking of actually removing a limb. You can chop, you can cut, or you can stab. So various techniques of muddying the water between, you know, multiple of those or what have you. That's when you get into stylization and all that. But if you break it down to black and white, that's really just those three things. And this is really a chopping tool. They're much more of these types of tools are battlefield oriented. They're immediately disabling. If you take off a limb, it's going to be a lethal blow. Controlling the bleeding is not something a lot of people are able to do in enough time to save that person's life. Losing an arm to a knife blow, you maybe have a minute and a half, 2 minutes where you're not savable. The leg is a whole lot faster because the femoral artery is a lot bigger. Obviously, if you lose your head, you're not coming back from that. Now, these are great for what they do, but there's not a lot you can do with them. They're not very adverse. They're maybe a cutting tool if you're talking about the top edge of the blade and more of a quick motion and the chopping motion. Okay, you only have certain geometries that you can utilize. The stabbing stuff is a whole section of force geometries that you can't utilize. Now, you're talking about something more like utility blades. Straight profile knives are great for utility work because sometimes you have to apply a lot of linear pressure, and any kind of curve is not going to efficiently apply that pressure in a straight line. So a straight blade is great for that, right? You can put a lot of pressure in a straight line, and it delivers that energy likewise. Fighting blades, you see this in cultures that had to deal with puncturing through armor. So the linear motion of jabbing straight into a piece of steel, the stabbing into a piece of into sheet steel armor, other types of armor, requires a different type of pressure than applying pressure or applying a stabbing motion that goes directly into soft tissue. It's just the way energy is dispersed is different, so you need a different blade profile to solve that problem. So that's where you see stuff like more Western style swords, European style swords. Some stuff like sword canes, thin swords. They're designed for different reasons. It was more of concealability and compactness, requiring a different set of techniques for that. I wouldn't say convenience. It's kind of like the equivalent of having a pocket pistol. It's not something you would take to a gunfight if you could help it, but because you needed something concealable or to fit into a particular social setting, you needed to develop techniques around the other requirements for your environment. The other thing about having a straight blade is, again, you can apply linear, very straight linear motion to do certain tasks, but for cutting, it's not optimal. Just because you're talking about a flat surface, so any pressure applied is spread out over a wide area. Be the equivalent of slapping somebody as opposed to punching them and having the energy concentrated on a small space. So anyway, you're talking about utility blades. They're obviously, again, sharp object. It will go into somebody, but they're not optimal for what we want to do when it comes to fighting knives. So, K-bar. Now, I will say that there's a lot of small, straight knives. It becomes a whole lot less when we're talking about really small knives. Were designed specifically for stabbing. Small knives are not good at cutting. They just don't have the surface. They don't have enough surface area to get a deep cut. You can get a really efficient blade profile, and you can get deeper. And it'll be enough to do some mechanical damage on somebody to stop a threat, but to really get deep lacerations through clothing and stuff, there's not enough blade to really to be efficient at that task. We make the knives smaller because we need to conceal them. We need them to fold up and fit in our pocket and that sort of a thing. But there's only so much you can do with a small knife. So small knife wise, they're going to be generally designed around one specific thing. They're going to be a cutting knife or they're going to be a stabbing knife. You just don't have enough blade to do any kind of chopping, which would be getting through bones in the limbs. Now, anyone who's been following my channel has seen this, right? This being the Scallywag Tactical Dagger. And I love this thing because it's a solid piece of metal. It's small. The whole thing, I think, is 7 inches. Yeah, about that. I think it's about 7. It looks about 7 inches. 1/4 inch thick. It's just a solid chunk of steel. It's very sharp. It's very pointy. No real edge. Probably it's just enough to increase aerodynamics. You know, reduce friction as the blade is going in and out. But because it's straight, you can grab it either way and it's the same, right? Now, having a curved blade for stabbing is beneficial for other things if you need it. It's more adaptable, but it requires you to have the ability to tell which direction the edge is. So, for a grunt knife, for a knuckle dragger like I used to be, this is a great thing to have. It's small, it's thin, it's tough, so you can get it fast. You can put it in a bunch of places where it's really accessible, like in the front of your body, but it doesn't get in the way of everything, it being smaller. So you can get it instantly, and it can solve some pretty heavy-duty issues, heavy-duty problems within the degree of the limitations of the short blade, and it not really slow you down. So these are great little backup knives or almost concealed carry knives. So, Scallywag Tactical Dagger.